It's time to take command with former NFL tight end Logan Paulsen and former Commanders beat reporter Craig Hoffman.
What's up? What's happening? Welcome in. It is the Take Command podcast. Logan Paulsen there, Craig Hoffman here. And as you hear this, assuming you're listening on the day that it comes out, the Commanders are in Miami getting ready for practice. So if you're listening to this later in the afternoon, no, this is not a practice recap because this is being recorded before the Dolphins joint practice. But joint practice at 10:15 a.m. on Thursday, and then, of course, the preseason game over the weekend down in Miami. We will talk about what to look for, what to expect from all of that, the challenges that Miami uniquely presents in just a little bit. But first, Logan, let's talk about what we've seen and a big, keyword big, roster move that the Commanders made on Tuesday before practice. They tried out Martavis Bryant and ultimately decided to sign him. They let one of the kickers go to make room. And that has sparked quite a bit of conversation about the wide receiver room. I think that was already an ongoing conversation based off how many snaps Jahan Dotson played in the preseason game. But what for you is kind of let's just start as broad as we can. The state of the wide receiver room is fill in the blank.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a bunch of things that just come to mind. Like, obviously, Terry's Terry, and I think you feel very good about what he's been doing. I think you feel good about what OZ's been doing. He's showed up in a nice way in the preseason game and practice. He's very consistent. And again, like, this is not receiver room, but I think it kind of fits in here. Like, Zach Ertz has done a really nice job, kind of as that third. That it's really second option, but like in the top three receiving kind of things. And I think, there are days where Jahan flashes and you feel good about what he's doing and how he looks. But I think there's other days where you see some of his limitations to his game, which we've talked about, coming off the preseason game. Just the lack of kind of consistent play strength shows up against press, shows up against like kind of that second level reroute. Sometimes at the top when people get a little handsy with him. I think he did a great job in practice yesterday. You and I were just talking about that, how he's able to kind of create some separation on some in cuts, and didn't get disrupted. He was going against Emmanuel Forbes, but I thought that looked good. And that's, again, it's a positive sign. But I think you look at Luke McCaffrey, and I think he looked good in the preseason game, and I think he had a pretty solid practice on Tuesday. But I think, he's been lacking a little bit. So I think this is just honestly a thing where it's like, there's some young pieces that are developing. We've talked about Bryson Tremaine, but he's going to definitely be like that 6th, 7th wide receiver with some special teams upside, not necessarily like starting caliber player. But I will say, seeing Brian on the sideline yesterday, like he's built in a very unique way. He's a big dude. He's tall. He's well put together. And he definitely has that kind of look of being like a one receiver. And, he's 32 years old. He hasn't played football for a long time. So I'm not saying he's coming in to, be the second receiver by any stretch of the imagination. But if you think he's got the talent and the upside and has some ability, like, this is like a win-win to me. You're carrying 2 kickers on the roster. You don't need to do that. Like, get one of those guys out of here, bring this body in, and see what he looks like. See how he picks the offense up. See how he learns what's going on. See how he fits with the guys. See how he fits with the culture. And it's like a free trial run. And I think you could easily get him to practice squad if you need to. But I just think it's a way to kind of say, maybe we can spice this up a little bit. Maybe we can find a little bit of some work here for the receivers. And I don't necessarily think it's an indictment of anybody, but I think it's just some new blood and a different body type. I think, Dan said this in his presser the other day. It's like, it's just a good body type to practice against because there are some big receivers in the NFL and Brian is that. So I think people want to make conclusions about what it means for Jahan, what it means for Luke. I don't think it has any effect on them, quite honestly, because he's not played. He was in the USFL last year or 2 years ago. So I don't think it affects them really. It's just more, why not check it out? It's like really like a very low cost investment. And if it hits, you look like a genius. And if it doesn't, it's fine. So
yeah, no, I think that's right. The only thing I would add is like, you don't add to a room if you're completely happy with it. But I think that this is just another piece of evidence that they're not completely happy with the receiver room. But I also think that it's one of those things that was on year 2, maybe even year 3, probably year 2 of like their project to-do list, right? We've talked about this where like they want to remake the culture, number one. Quarterback was the biggest thing they wanted to get done considering where they were in the draft. They're hoping to never pick that high again. And so you take the quarterback at number 2, and then it's like, okay, what's left when we get back on the clock in the second round? They turned out they have Johnny Newton, a guy they had a much higher grade on that's available. So they go that route. They go, attack some of the big culture guys with the Sanders still later in that second round. So there's all those kinds of things that I think just should be said in terms of they're not fully happy with the receiver room, but we know that was the case. They wanted to see what Jahan was. Luke is a guy that they brought in that they wanted to see, and they knew might take some time as a position switch guy just a couple of years ago. They bring in the vets like OZ. They bring back a vet in Crowder. And so they kind of put a nice floor underneath them. And that's, I think, where we're at is like, they have a really nice floor in their receiver room. There's like 7 or 8 guys that I think can play NFL football, but I don't know how many dudes are playing really high quality NFL football. And I think the hope is that Jahan can get back to that maybe a guy like Diami can be unlocked in a way he just never has before. And he's obviously had a nice camp and it makes the play in the game. We all want to see that actually carry over into the regular season in a way that it never has before. I thought there was a fun over-under on Beltway Football Pod with JP and Mitch. Diami's got 476 career receiving yards. Does he get over/under that this season? If he's the number 3, he should be over in a Kliff Kingsbury offense where they want to sling it around because it's only like 28 yards a game, but he's never done it. That's his whole entire career to this point. So what are you going to do? Take the over on his career yardage in one season? Like that feels crazy when you frame it that way. So I think the Bryant thing is, like you said, it's no risk, potentially high reward. The one guy that I do think it's most interesting for perhaps is Tremaine. Because he is the other big body type. And I feel like we both have been high. I mean, you've been leading the Bryson Tremaine charge for 2 years now. We're both high on him and what he's done. He continues to produce. He had another big catch in practice yesterday. But I'd also pay attention when a lot of people on the beat start to say the same thing over and over again. I'm like, oh, that seems to be something that's coming out of the building. And the thing I'm starting to hear a lot about Tremaine is the lack of speed. And even though he's gotten open and it's worked, like the fact that I've heard John say this, I've heard Ben say this, I feel like I've heard Nikki say this, like, oh, he's a 4.6 guy. Oh, he's not that fast. Like to me, that's coming out of the building in a way that they understand the limitations of Bryson Tremaine and why he was a undrafted or 7th round pick, whichever one he was. Yeah, undrafted last year, and they're looking to see if they can get a better version of the bigger body.
Yeah, and I think you're 100% right. Like if you're a fan listening and following this team, if 4 people say it, it's definitely something that someone in the building has said to somebody, right? So it's a good kind of piece of information. I think that's just good kind of process. But what I would say is, again, this is me. This is one person. I disagree with that evaluation of him. I think he plays faster than he ran. And I think when you look at his 40 time, I want to say it was like a 4.56, 4.57, so not slow. Cam Sims, I think, ran a slower 40 than that, or it's like right in the same range, and Cam Sims was an effective player in the NFL. I think there's a perception of him as a certain type of body type, but I think he's been productive. And I think the other thing I would just call attention to, and I think this is a valid criticism, and it's a valid criticism of every player who's not done it versus starters, is like he's been very productive. I'd say at all levels, like even with the 2s, relatively. Like he'll line up against Noah Igbenogany and have a nice catch, and Noah's going to play significant minutes for this team probably this year, whether it's outside or inside. But I do think that, like, what does that look like versus a true 1? What does that look like versus Sauce Gardner, for example? And I don't know. I think there are guys that can kind of survive being big and physical and violent. I do think he has like a violent separation ability, really good deceleration and acceleration for a big guy, but for a big guy is the modifier there. So how does that look versus a 1? And I think that's something you always got to consider. And I think the thing about Brian is he is a kind of a unicorn athlete, and I think like those guys don't come across your table very often. And again, like it's low risk, high reward. I think he ran like a 4.3 coming out, 4.37, and he's like 6'4" and a quarter. Like he's a big old hoss that can run and move around. So I understand the value here, I guess is what I'm saying. And I understand the implication for Bryson Tremaine, and like being a undrafted guy, like this is the lot, man. They're always looking for someone better. They're always saying, like I remember having conversations with scouts when I was in Washington, basically like you aren't fast enough. You aren't like long enough. Like we're always looking for someone that fits that archetype, and this is something you're always going to be fighting against. So I get it, and it's part of the deal for him. I don't necessarily agree with what I've seen, but I understand why you feel that way because you haven't seen him do it against ones, and can he even do it against ones? And that's the $1 million question. And he's an undrafted free agent, so there's no cost.
Yeah, not even one they brought in. Like
I don't need to push that. I can just be like, yeah, he's here, he's doing fine. But I can always look for that better athlete, I guess.
Yeah. Talked to Bryson yesterday after practice, by the way. You can check out that interview in the podcast feed of The Hoffman Show. Bryant, by the way, you mentioned his kind of freakish athletic ability, fourth round pick in 2014. So again, we're talking a long time ago, but you're in a 4.42 at the combine.
Yeah.
And he also has he has a track background. He was a sub 1100 guy.
Yeah.
10.85.
He's a freak. He's a freak.
Yeah.
There's a reason that there's a reason you get drafted in 2014 and you're getting signed to a roster in 2024. You know what I mean? Like just like,
and for folks that don't know, he was with DQ in Dallas last year. He was on the practice squad, but he said that he was like 230 last year. He's 208 right now. So we'll see what he does.
He didn't practice yesterday, but he looked good on the sideline. So
yeah, he was out there a little bit. I saw him lay a nice little block on a screen, and you're like, oh, that's a big hoss right there.
Yeah.
Haven't seen him like open it up yesterday. By the way, speaking of dudes running fast, I don't think you were out at practice yet. Jaden just like ran randomly in the middle of a drill. He not like with the ball, but like I think it was routes on air, and they were switching sides of the field, and he decided he was going to sprint. And I just had that moment of like, oh, that dude's really fast. So that was.
Because he hasn't really run like that. He hasn't run like that in practice at all. Like I know people say, "Oh, he's a good runner," and you've seen flashes. But if you're comparing him to Marcus Mariota, like Marcus definitely flashes more juice as a runner, and I kind of feel like Jaden's kind of messing around a little bit when he's running the football. Like he's not really digging out. So it's cool to hear that he was opening up a little bit yesterday.
Yeah, and I don't even think he was opening it up. It was just like. He decided he was going to jog fast, and his jog fast was real fast. And I say that as someone who just came back from the Olympics. And like, man, when you see some of these like world-class runners, their legs look fake when they run. And Jaden, obviously, he wasn't like full sprinting, but yeah, damn, that dude can move.
Nice and bouncy.
Yeah. Speaking of people that are very fast, we will talk about the Miami Dolphins and what to expect on the joint practice scene in the game this weekend in just a few minutes. But anything else from practice yesterday that you want to talk about? I definitely want to talk about the situational work, but what to you is the big takeaway from practice yesterday?
I mean, that was going to be like my big thing. I thought the offense looked extremely sharp yesterday, like extremely sharp. Like it's just one of those practices where like, I've been a part of it playing where it's like everybody is locked in. Like the angles are good in the run game. The timing's good on some of the jet sweep stuff. Like the fakes by the quarterback it's perfectly timed up. The spacing and the route concepts are great. And, even like some of the quarterback run stuff, just the way it times up. You're just like, man, that looks awesome. And I think that was the one thing, in addition to the situational stuff, that really stuck out to me. Is it just like, I think it's like every fourth practice, the offense just looks like totally on it. And I think this is one of those days, and probably the best they've looked. And so, whatever they had for breakfast that morning, they definitely need to do it again because they were locked in and they look sharp.
Yeah, no, for sure. I thought like even just starting in the first, O on D periods where they're doing some team run stuff, and the first run, I feel like it was just like, oh, that's out. Like that's real. That's not a training camp run. Was
that the one Austin Eckler? That was 4 minute, but Austin Eckler had a big run.
Yeah, Eckler. That was the first play of the 4 minute. Eckler got out, and you're like, that's not how you want to start a 4 minute drill if you're a defense. But no, I think it was B-Rob, but Eckler had a couple too in team run where like they're into the second level of the defense, and the defensive coaches were obviously not thrilled. Joe Witt Jr. is yelling at everybody. Daryl Tapp is yelling at everybody. Like that
was like a constant metronome of yelling. Daryl Tapp was just like, "Come on, get off the ball, strike them back," and it was just like there was no like it was just like a constant thing for the last 30 minutes of practice because of kind of the. Again, how efficiently the offense was running the football.
Yeah, I think they were also trying to strike up some urgency in that defense. There's a point, there's a screen pass earlier in the practice where BSJ doesn't get where Joe Witt Jr. wants him, and he's, Joe just gets right up on him, and he's like, "You got to get your pads on him. You got to get here," and like they're letting him have it. And I think that's part like motivation, and like these days happen too. This is not some massive grand indictment of the Commanders' defense.
Sure.
Like we are in the dog days of training camp. Some days you just come out sluggish. The offense was sharp. Like credit to the offense, but as defensive coaches, you're not just being like, it happens. Like you're trying to fix it. You're trying to see if you can turn your guys around in the middle of practice, and they couldn't yesterday, which gets us to the situational drills, which is the end of practice. And so they did two different periods and different, not just like they repeated the same one. The two offense went up against the one defense. And to me, like actually, Logan, I'd be curious to ask you, is it ever presented as like one big drill? Because if you want to take it ones to ones, it was like, hey, defense, we need a stop to get the ball back to the offense, because they did 4-minute defense, 2-minute offense for the ones. Or is it just two totally separate periods?
That's a really good question. I didn't even think about it until you mentioned it, honestly. But I do think that's a decent way to kind of characterize it if that's what you want to do. I've never had that experience, but I did think it was funny at the time that they went 4-minute with one group and 2-minute with the other. But that makes more sense now that you mention it. And so maybe Dan is excellent. I will say at that kind of stuff. I do remember being in Atlanta with him and kind of being in every team meeting in season and even in the off season. We'd have a situation come up in practice and we'd watch and talk through it for about 15 minutes every single day. We did something like that. So I do think that would be something he would definitely kind of talk through. Hey, 4-minute is this. We got to get a stop. Defensively, we'll get the stop, get the ball back to our offense, and work a 2-minute drill. And I think just seeing the mechanic of that is again, I don't know if they did that or not, but something that Dan was dogmatic about when I was with him in Atlanta.
It would make a lot of sense if they set it up that way. Like, hey, and also like it's the kind of thing where you could have your one offense on the sideline cheering on your one defense. For most of the time, it's like offense cheering on offense, defense cheering on defense. It's very separated in camp. I didn't see any of that, but like that would be kind of a cool way to set it up. Yeah. Anyway, so they go 4-minute first, where the two offenses on the one defense, and as we just said, it opens up with a big run to Eckler, and then they just are able to get it done. Marcus has some good runs in there, including one where he slides right before the sideline, like good game management out of him. A couple of completions, some big runs, and then ultimately the drive concludes, Logan, when Marcus gets a D lineman to jump on a 3rd and short a hard count, and They walk off, win the game on a hard count, defensive offsides. Sam Cosmi, by the way, I don't know if you saw this. The back judge didn't throw, or the side judge didn't throw his actual like physical flag, and Cosmi runs up. He's like, "Do you have a flag?" Because Sam Cosmi wanted to throw the yellow hanky and signify that his side had won the drill. But what else did you see on that 4-minute situation? And really, I would say more so from the defense, because it's kind of on them in terms of the drill. Like we can talk about the offense, good job by the twos, but you want to get a stop defensively there is really kind of the bigger story.
Yeah, so I think the thing is, like in 4-minute, like what you're really looking for is you're not looking for a chunk play, but if you do get a chunk play, usually win the drill, right? And I think to start the drill off with what seemed to be like a 40-yard run from Austin Eckler. And again, it was to the offensive left and we stand on the offensive right. So I couldn't really see I remember what it was. It was a duo play basically. And they had kind of a funky formation that they lined up with, a lot of different personnel on the field. And I think it looked like an obvious misfit to me from just how the run hit. Like usually what you're gauging is like, there's the formation. This is how the linebackers should fit. And if the running back just doesn't even stop as he runs through the hole, usually they just misfit the gaps there. And that's why you get in those kind of unusual formations. So that ended up being, what'd you say, Craig? Like 30-yard run, right? 30-yard run.
I mean, they marked it off as like a 30-yard run. I honestly thought it might have been a house call.
Yeah, because there was one more guy to beat, but again, you're trying to work the drill.
There was one more guy to beat, and Eckler was beating him.
Yeah. And so then the next play is like, quarterback kind of zone read type thing. And Mariota's excellent at that. Keeper. And I think that's the one where Mariota slides down. Good thinking there. And then you're in that kind of short yardage situation. Chris Rodriguez gets a run for 2 yards. You're in a 3rd and 5 kind of situation. And they jump offside. So to me, that's about as poorly as that could have gone for the defense, like in terms of just scripting it out. And again, like you said, those days do happen, right? There are days where the defense looks amazing, the offense can't do anything. But in terms of like how you script a 4-minute period, that is exactly what you want from the offense. Like you don't really have to throw the football. You're getting to some creative stuff, but nothing too creative. I think they ran a jet sweep in there maybe also, like that kind of thing. And it just and it was like what I said before, everything hit. You put that weird formation in, so they do misfit it. They misfit it, it's a big run. You put this jet sweep in out of this formation, so they overload to this side. It's a 10-yard gain. They run the keeper, they all drop out underneath the keeper, and Mariota ends up sliding for a 10. It just was like when you call those plays, it's the exact result you're looking for. So it literally went about as well as it could have gone for the for the offense. And defensively. Like that's something I was talking about with Fletch the other day. Like there are days where I think the defense is playing really good football. They're fitting runs well. They're locked in. They ask the dime and nickel players to do a lot in terms of fitting from depth, but then there are days where they kind of misfit it, and because that is a challenging fit for some of those off-ball players, and they seem to get gashed, like you were talking about with the B-Rob thing too. So that's something I'm kind of keeping an eye on, because that was a little bit of a issue in Dallas. Like they played decent run defense, but they'd give up kind of these games where they'd give up 120 yards rushing. So I'm kind of trying to figure out whether that's a systematic thing or whether that's just kind of people learning a new defense here in Washington. So again, I'm not saying this is the worst thing or the best thing. I'm just saying it's an observation about one day of practice that and one 4-minute drill where the defense looked a little unsettled and the offense looked great.
Yeah, and you're certainly hoping that misfits aren't a regular thing with Bobby Wagner getting everybody in place. And Bobby was out there for I think that drill yesterday. So
yeah, I'll defer to you on that.
Yeah, overall, is my concern level super high with Bobby Wagner getting everybody lined up and getting things where they need to be over the course of a season? No, but if there's a systematic weakness that some teams are going to be able to exploit, that's less than ideal, but these things happen, and we'll see how it goes. Obviously, Miami has an interesting run game, so we'll see what happens this weekend with that. And obviously, as we get going in the season, kind of be a week by week thing. And the cool part I think about for me doing this podcast with you is like sometimes you're really on that stuff ahead of time, where it's like, this is the kind of run play that is causing harm. This team runs that run play. How do they adjust? And we can kind of watch that going into the week on a much higher level, which is fun. So that's why you subscribe to the podcast, kids. All right. So the offense, the two offense wins the day. They let the one offense back on the field, despite the one defense not getting the stop, quote unquote. They let the 2-minute drill happen anyway. And man, it was the one offense versus like a 2.5 defense. You had some 2s and some 3s out there, and it looked like it was supposed to. If your one offense is good and you're going against backups, they hot knife buttered through that defense. Bang, bang, bang. I actually have the plays in my notes. They start off with a completion to Zacchaeus. Then Jaden has a really nice rollout completion to Zach Ertz. One play that I would love to talk about, they get a huge, wide open, easy completion to Zach Ertz to get down to the 10. B-Rob runs to the 5. You have the miss to Terry, kind of a weird play where Jaden winds up keeping it, running into the back of the O-line again, and now you're on 3rd down. And there's kind of like this, all of a sudden, the coaches that get in their ear and they're like, hey, clock's running. They rush to the line of scrimmage because, obviously the clock's running, it's 3rd down, and they get that back shoulder TV touchdown to Terry McLaurin, which you can watch on the Commander's social media. And then Terry starts yelling at people that he plays like he's 6'4". So what stuck out to you from that 2-minute drill? And I definitely would like to talk about the one to Ertz, but full playbook or full slate for you, empty slate. What did you see?
Yeah, so I think the thing that stuck out to me about that 2 minutes specifically was just like the total mastery by Jaden Daniels. Like he just looked like in control. Like there's, we talk a lot about, are his feet on time? Is he, It just was like, I get to the top of my drop and the ball is out. And the defense really had no opportunity. I think the one to Zacchaeus was great. The first one to Zach was really nice because it's kind of like leading him away from a tight coverage player. There's someone rolling down. Zach slides, catches that football. And then the next one is like a corner route. And the confidence that he has in Zach to win. And I think that, everyone talks about like what is a good ecosystem for a quarterback, and it's trusting your guy to win, right? And there's certain guys when you're watching and he's out there, or Marcus is out there, and you kind of look at the receivers and you're like, ooh, like these guys are all good players, but who do I trust to consistently win? And so like with that one group, it's like it's Terry, it's Zach, and like he looks over there, the coverage disperses well, and it's not like he's throwing to Zach. It's like, I don't remember the exact coverage cell, but it's like some type of 2, like there's a little bit of a void there for the corner, and he's throwing to grass. Like he's throwing the ball before Zach's even out of his cut, and they are just so locked in on the same page that Zach's able to run under it effortlessly because Zach does a good job kind of stemming up that defender, breaking out, and it's right there. So that was awesome. Then you mentioned the zone read quarterback run thing where he runs into the back of the offensive line. Good job by the defense there, actually, being locked in and like being assignment sound. And then the fade to Terry was like really sick. It was really sick because he walks up, they have a play called, you can tell, and he just looks at Terry, gives him a little bit of a like kind of like just a super subtle hand signal, and then doesn't even take a beat. They go on the quick set hut, and he doesn't wait for Terry to get open. He knows Terry's going to win. He puts that ball out there, and I thought, to your point about like managing the clock, there was like 24 seconds left. So if that ball is incomplete, they still have an opportunity to run more plays because I think that was third down or second down. I don't remember exactly what it was. Yeah,
I think it was third because you had a miss to Terry on first down where like
and then the run,
no one was open. But like even that play, you talk about the mastery, like no one's open, and Jaden is like, all right, I'm going to give Terry a little bit of a shot here, but like I'm not going to sit here and run around and waste time. I don't have time to waste time. I'm not going to extend the play. Like he gets through his progressions. I was actually listening to an interview with Kliff yesterday. Kliff was on Scoop City with Diana Rossini and Chase Daniel, the new podcast they have from The Athletic. And Diana asked Kliff, like, what's kind of Jaden's superpower early on here? And Kliff goes, he gets through his progressions really well. Like a lot of young quarterbacks get hung up on their first one. And Jaden is like, nope. And Jaden got through everything, realized there's nothing there, but also because of the situation was like, I can't then extend the play and waste time. He throws a ball like kind of out of the end zone. Terry somehow gets a hand on it, but it falls incomplete, and you live to see the next down. So then there was the zone read, second down, and so this is third down.
Yeah, and it just was like the whole process, like because the clock's running. They just ran a run. Right. The clock's running. He gets the play call, and one of the things about this offense that we've seen from camp, we saw it a little bit in the preseason, is they're so quick at getting the play in. They're so good at it because it's all kind of this air raidy college hand signal, like we're getting everybody on the same page right now, and the defense is barely set, and like you can just tell like Terry might have been running a slant. I have no idea, but he just gives them a little bit of whatever. Throws the fade, perfect ball. Terry makes a play, right? Because that's what Terry does. And it just was like knowing your matchups, understanding what you want to do with the football, and then the anticipatory element of the throws he made was also great. And again, I don't want to say he's like God or anything here, but like it was very sharp from him, but also from the entire offense. Like protection was good. The routes were awesome. We mentioned the second route to Zach on the corner. Like that's big time stuff, man. Like Zach's keeping the space. You understand where it's going to be. Ball's out easy, and he gets out of bounds. So that was much like the 4-minute, which went about as well. Like I felt like there was a little bit of luck. Defense misfits some stuff in the 4-minute. This was the offense kind of just dictating tempo, dictating opportunity, and I think Jaden did a great job getting the football where he needed to go with great accuracy and understanding the situation at a really high level.
Yeah, I think it also showed the importance of getting a chunk play or two early in a 2-minute drive because they just go bang, 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 and all of a sudden they're inside the 10-yard line. They're at the 6-yard line like that. Yeah. And that gives you the time where you're not rushing. Like if you can get inside the 10 and have 4 plays, that is ideal in a 2-minute because they were down 17-13 and thus they need a touchdown. And so to have that time, and like you said, they had time for one more play if that fade falls incomplete because of how they manage the clock. And frankly, time for, to draw a penalty perhaps and get another first down. So it's you have time for 4+ plays, even though you're inside the 10, hopefully you're scoring. But if on third down you draw a PI, but you didn't leave yourself enough time to take advantage of getting 2 or 3 plays from the 1-yard line, well, that's not as good as if you did. And so the ability to quickly get down into a prime strike zone was great. Obviously, they didn't need it. They get the touchdown. Good job. Anything else from practice yesterday before we look ahead to Miami?
Well, probably my favorite thing from obviously those drills were great. My favorite thing was from practice yesterday was the second and long, third and long drill that they did, which I think was right after that maybe. And I just think like there's so many times in an NFL football game where that situation comes up. Second and long, second and 10, maybe you got a penalty, second and 15, negative run, second and 11. And that's a tough spot to be in. And so how do you manage that? How do you say, hey, we got to get to 3rd and 5, 3rd and 4, live to play another day? And I think I've done that drill before, but as I've studied football more and been on this side of it, you see how absolutely critical that is for game management. And then again, that 3rd and long situation also, because the defense is going to have a certain response. They're going to bring a little bit more pressure. They're going to heat you up. Like, how are our protections? Where's the answer? Especially on 2nd and long, because you see quarterbacks, I think, sometimes try to push the football down the field. But hey, we can survive on a check down, because if we get to 3rd and 4, we're doing okay. So I love that drill because it feels like the most real football you're going to get in a bad situation. And so I love that they're drilling that, because think about how many times last year, just as an example, because that's what we're very familiar with, lots of fans are, you get an incomplete pass on first down at 2nd and 10. What is your plan to get to a 3rd and manageable? And here we got to see some of Kliff's thought process on how to do that and how Joe Witt's going to handle those situations. And I think for a fan of like detailed football, it was really cool to see that drill. And I thought it was like maybe the most beneficial drill of the day for the team. They're all beneficial, but it just in terms of like something that you're going to have to do. And if you can get good at that, you're going to win some games, because you're going to steal possessions basically.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, everything is situational. So I think that the emphasis on situational football, like, it's 2nd and 7 in the middle of the second quarter. Like, technically that's a situation, but really the game is going to come down to those 2nd and longs, to like, you're going to have one of those on a drive, on a lot of drives, or a 3rd and short, like goal line, red zone. Like, these situations are going to come up on almost every single drive, unless you just went 3 and out, in which case you still probably were in 2nd and long at some point. I love how much they're kind of situationing up practice. Like, everything has it's not just like, hey, there's 20 minutes on the clock for the period and we're just going to run plays. Those are being minimized. Like, you do have some team running stuff yesterday, but everything seems to be within the context of a game. And I just think that's a great way to practice. Last but not least, before we get out of here on this edition of Take Command, the practice situation on Thursday, it's you, Burgundy and Gold, against the Miami Dolphins. Miami presents such a unique challenge in terms of the speed of their wide receiving core. Mike McDaniel, obviously a tremendous offensive coordinator with a lot of innovation in terms of how he runs his system. I think this is obviously a really exciting thing that unfortunately I'm going to be sitting in my home instead of watching. But it is what it is. Logan, you're not going down for the practice, just for the game, yeah?
Just for the game, yep. Just for the game.
But I can already tell folks listening, if you want more on the practice itself, Ben Stanig is going to join me at 5 o'clock on the Hoffman Show. So you can definitely check out that. Ben will be down in Miami. So that's a good place you can go. If it's before 5 o'clock, listen live. If it's after 5 o'clock on Thursday, the Hoffman Show podcast is available now. So go check it out. But in terms of what we are planning on, or what we think we'll see from the joint practice, the things that we would want to take out of it if we were Dan Quinn, Joe Witt Jr., Kliff Kingsbury, what immediately pops to mind in terms of priorities for the Miami joint practice?
Yeah, so I think if you're looking from a coaching staff, there's a couple things you want to look at. One, I think you want to dabble in some of the game plan stuff you want to see. Not everything, but kind of some stuff you're working on. Like, you can show more in these joint practices because they're not open. They're not on TV, obviously. And the film doesn't get shared. So if you're Kliff, like, let's try some of these formations we've been dabbling with, right? That we're definitely not going to see in the preseason. How does that affect this this Baltimore defense? Anthony Weaver was in Baltimore last year. That's kind of the it defense in the NFL right now. How does Jaden handle some of that disguise coverage, those coverage disguises, those replacement fire zones that they run a ton of? Like, because again, like I look at like, hey, we ran this, we were able to check to that great fade play to Diami in the preseason because we knew the coverage. You're not going to know the coverage as well against this defense. So, Kliff, we're going to do some different formations, different plays. Jaden, how do you handle the different coverages, like different contours, different personnel? How do we handle that? And then I think it's also offensively just a great evaluation tool. And then it's the same thing if you reverse it. It's defensively like, hey, we're going to see all this team speed. And Miami does a great job of, with all these little motions and shifts. I was watching their first preseason game. And for a first preseason game, they had a lot of offense in. They have so many motions and tight formations and ways to get to empty. And you're just like, man, you're testing rules for backup football players here. So you're going to have a lot of that. And we've got a lot of young players on defense. How do they handle that? How do they handle that movement? How do they handle that communication? Dan, Joe Wood Jr., literally everyone on the defense talks about how important the communication is. Like, that's where you're going to see it. And I'm not so worried about, Tyreek Hill burning him over the top for a touchdown. Like, I know that's something fans worry about, but I think you're worried more about schematically, general structure, how you handle some of the nuance here and how we handle some of our more advanced install versus a really good offense.
Yeah, I'm not concerned about Tyreek Hill beating someone one-on-one because I would hope during the season when there's an actual game plan in, you don't leave Tyreek Hill one-on-one. What I am concerned about is if Tyreek Hill scores the way that he scored last year, which is massive coverage bust, as they had at the time at FedEx Field, what would now be known as Commanders Field at Landover. But yeah, you can't have that stuff. And I think Miami does as good of a job as any team in the league of testing that. They motion and use formations, and they obviously have the team speed that it really tests your rules because everything happens so much faster with Hill and Waddle and all the guys that they have. And so I think that communication defensively, this is kind of the ultimate test, and I'm really glad that they're having it in the preseason. And then defensively, offensively with Miami's defense, like I think the protection is obviously the biggest thing you're continuing to watch, obviously beyond what Jaden does and looking at different fronts. But one thing that you're really good at explaining when we get into the season and we're breaking down film is like, oh, this alignment means I have to do this in terms of targeting this run or targeting the protection, and getting to see the Jets, then the Commanders D-line, some of the fronts they use. But then now you have a totally different front. How does Kliff handle it? How does the O-line handle it? How does Bobby Johnson handle it in terms of making sure that everything's blocked up, whether it's in protection or in the run game?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things about, Miami is they're going to be like a 3-down structure to base, and so if you look at New York, they're a 4-down structure. The Washington Commanders kind of bounce between 3 and 4-down structure. So that's always good to get some exposure to people who major in different defensive spacing, because then you kind of say, does this run look okay? How do we kind of get these new calls in? And again, I credited Tyler Biadasz. He did a great job making sure those guys are ready to go in the preseason game. That's a big lift for him. I'm excited. I think Andrew Wiley's going to practice. I mean, he practiced a little bit yesterday, and Dan said if he practiced yesterday, he should practice on Thursday. So hopefully we get to see him and Cosme working together and kind of see that starting group. I think obviously Brandon Coleman wants to kind of put his name in the hat for left tackle, but I think Lucas is very serviceable there. So Lucas, Allegretti, Biadasz, Cosme, and Wiley, I think, what does that actually look like? Because that was one of the big criticisms coming out of the Jets camp, is that they couldn't pass protect. But now you've kind of got your group here, right? So how does that look? Does it look a little bit better? Again, they have some juice down at pass rush. And like you said, how's the communication with the new pieces added? It should be fine, but it's always good to kind of work that through. And again, I think maybe the most important thing is for Jaden Daniels just adding more looks at different defenses to that CPU and see how he handles all that stuff. So,
no, for sure. And I think for the O-line, it's like, okay, if they play well against Miami, chalk it up to the Jets being awesome. And by the way, you're missing, your top 3 tackles in those Jets practices. So
which is tough. So
you're fighting an uphill battle against one of the best fronts in the league. Okay, well, there's no real shame in losing that. Whereas against Miami, it's like, okay, well, now we got 2 of the top 3 guys back on the outside. They're not as good because some of their best pass rushers are still hurt. Chubb and Phillips, like those guys are not coming back till midseason, but they do have some juice that is there and ready now. But it's a much more even fight. And so how do you perform in that environment? Then you have the game itself, Logan. Like, what do you expect in terms of reps? And one thing that I'll just flag real quick, I thought Quinn's answer yesterday when he was asked about, hey, when you were in Atlanta 4 preseason games, now 3. How does that affect you? He talked about wanting to see specifically young guys for like a certain number of quarters to get an evaluation, which I thought was a really interesting framing, because we always just kind of talk about it as like, oh, we want to see this many games, this many drives. And I'm sure that they thought about it on drive level, not just a quarter level. But with kind of that framing, knowing that somewhere in DQ's mind,
right.
And probably to an extent, Adam Peters is the one who's ultimately going to name the 53. Like, what do we expect in terms of playing time distribution? Let's start on offense and obviously with Daniels.
Yeah, I think Daniels, that's the big story. And what I would expect, and I don't know for sure, is that you're probably going to get quarter and a half, quarter, something like that. Just let him get out there a little bit longer. I know some people want to say, oh, you should play a half, you should do this. I think it probably comes down to how effective the drives he has are. You know what I'm saying? Let's say he goes out there and has 2 drives like he had against the Jets. Like, he's coming off the field. Like, you're not going to leave him out there for a third. But let's say he's got a 3 and out. He has 1 good one. You probably want to see the offense out there for 1 more. So I think he's probably got, I don't know, what do you say, 15 to 20-ish type plays. You know what I mean? That's an assumption. I don't know that for sure. And that's what I'd want to see, because I want to see him out there a little bit more. I want to see him out there with that first offensive line. I want to see him out there with Terry a little bit and just kind of, again, get a little lather going, get a little sweat. Let's play some football. You know, I think the Miami Dolphins, I would assume, are not going to put everything they've got in, but they're going to have a little bit more in. And so how does he handle some of that adversity? I want to see him get in bad spots. I want to see him get in a 2nd and long. I want to see him in a 3rd and 10. You know what I'm saying? I want to see that. And how
do you think they're going to let him play a little bit, as opposed to like being out there but not really playing, which is what he did against the Jets? This
is what I want, but I'm a little bit dubious because I think they are being very cautious with him. So I want to see, but again, like if you're playing a quarter, let's just say hypothetically, you're going to get in a bad spot at some point, and then we got to play ball. You know what I'm saying? We got to play ball. We got to get a first down. So it becomes a little bit more challenging to regulate. Now, they could call a draw, they could call a screen, they could do a bunch of different stuff to insulate him. But I do think that is something that I'd like to see, and I think we will see more of. Now, the degree is probably, it's probably not going to be dialed all the way up to 10. It's probably in that 5.5 range. So you're going to see conservative play calling, but I think you're going to see, with that starting group out there, offensive linemen, you're going to see it touch more, is what I would expect and what I hope to see. So I'm really looking forward to being there on the sideline and seeing him out there just for more than 11 snaps, which will be good. So,
right. Then I think the interesting question too becomes, how do you split up the rest of the game? Like, do you give Jaden a quarter, Marcus a quarter, and then Driscoll the whole second half with Hartman being out? And then also, do we see, like, on defense, the John Allens of the world for the first time this fall in a game?
That's something that I think only Dan can answer, really, is because, like, if you're Bobby Wagner, like, do you need to see him in the preseason? Probably not. Zach Ertz, do you need to see him in the preseason? Probably not. So I think there are going to be a couple of those old head guys. Does John fall in that category? Does Duran fall in that category? I don't know. Maybe I'd like to see them play, but maybe the staff feels differently about it. So I don't have any good insight on that necessarily, but I would expect them to play. I would expect a lot of those guys who didn't play the first week to play, but I think there's going to be a select few group of guys. The Bobby, Zach, guys who have been around for a while who won't play this at all this preseason. But I do think John and Duran might get a little bit of burn. I'd hope they get a little bit of burn. Again, just to kind of see, and this is probably a selfish thing as a fan, I want to see the defense cooking. I want to see Frankie Louvu out there. I want to see those guys up front, like, really creating pressure. And I think hopefully we get to see it.
Yeah, Terry played a little bit in that first game, so you have to imagine he's going to play, and especially if Jaden's out there, Terry's going to want to be out there. And I think Zach's going to want to be out there. I would not play Zach Ertz. Seeing what I've seen from him in camp and knowing how valuable he is, I'm like, we cannot mess around with that. So Zach does, and he doesn't, right? Because you could say, well, if that's true about Zach, well, obviously it's true about Jaden. Well, yeah, but Jaden needs the experience. Zach Ertz doesn't need the experience. So I would say Zach and Bobby are in a different class where you just be like, nope, we're good. We'll see y'all. Right. We'll see y'all in Tampa. Everyone else, I think I would play. I've always been an advocate for bringing in a different punter and protecting Tress Way. No one ever seems to do it.
No one's on that same page with you. They did work out some punters the other day. They did for that reason, but
no, they wanted apparently the punt returners to catch right-footed punts,
which is good thinking. So
yeah,
good for them.
Smart. And you have, in case something, God forbid, does happen to Tress, you have some guys in the hopper. I will say, I'll stick this nugget at the end of the podcast here. During one of the 11-on-11 drills yesterday, Riley Patterson, the kicker that they kept, he he was kicking on the side field, and he somehow hit the upright again.
Dude, maybe he's practicing hitting the upright. I
mean,
had kickers in college. They played the upright game, so they would have like a certain number of kicks to hit the upright, and then they'd move. And if you could hit the upright crossbar upright, you won the game. So I don't know. Maybe that's the game he's playing. Who knows?
Maybe. Hey, if he's that accurate, then maybe he's going to win the job.
Right.
By the way, people, the reason nobody that covers the team is freaking out about kicker is because none of us anticipate the kicker that's going to kick off for this team on opening day to actually be here yet. He has to get cut by another team first. Okay, that's our show. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. However it is that you have consumed this show. If it's on YouTube, that subscribe button's right there in front of you. I know that if you have not hit it before, you can hit it right now. If you are listening, you might have to pull out the phone if you're like driving and listening. Just, do so safely, but eventually, whether you subscribe, follow, depending on if you're listening in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, just go ahead and do that same thing. We want this football goodness to get to you without you having to search for it. So this is just us helping you, or we're helping
help
you.
us.
Yeah, help us help you. Somebody
You're
help
helping
me.
us. We're helping each other.
Yeah, just hit subscribe. That's the point. All right. That's Logan. I'm Craig. We'll see you with a game review early next week. And of course, coverage from Miami on the Hoffman Show, 4 to 7 on the Team 980, including Ben Standing, 5 o'clock on Thursday. Thanks for listening and subscribing because you just did that. And we'll see you next week. Thanks for watching this clip of Take Command, which has a brand new home.
That's right. You can watch on YouTube at the Team 980.
You can also listen to full episodes in the free Odyssey app, which is now enabled with Apple CarPlay. So we'll just, follow you around.